Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Artists and Curators conversation in conjunction with our current exhibition, The Shadow of the Sun, Ross Bleckner and Zachari Logan, on view at Wave Hill through August 15th. Before we begin, there are some things I'd like to mention. You'll notice that there is a chat function. There's both a chat function and a Q&A function. The chat is for general comments and shout outs to the group. And then the Q&A function is for asking the panelists specific questions. So you can ask your questions during the conversation and we'll try to address it, but some questions will be answered during the Q&A portion of the program toward the end. I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional ancestral unceded homelands of the Lenape, the Munsee, the Manhattan, the Canarsie, the Matinacock, the Shinnecock, and other indigenous nations. We respect that many indigenous people continue to live and work on this land and recognize their ongoing contributions to the region. We also acknowledge the enslaved Africans whose labor built and developed the Northeast during the colonial era and beyond. We also have participants on this panel who would like to acknowledge that they are joining us today from Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. Wave Hill is a public garden and cultural center located in the Bronx, and in our gallery, we present art that explores human connections to the natural world. So we're so pleased to be presenting the exhibition, The Shadow of the Sun, which pairs New York-based artist Ross Bleckner and Canadian artist Zachari Logan, whose individual practices and collaborations explore the omnipresence of life and death through notions of loss, decay, visibility, invisibility, memory, flora, and landscape. The exhibition is co-curated by Wayne Baerwaldt, Jennifer McGregor, and Leah Taylor, and it's organized by the Kenderdine Art Gallery, College Art Galleries at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, and Wave Hill. We're so thrilled to have the two artists and all three curators participating in tonight's talk. We are grateful to the Consulate General of Canada in New York for their support of this exhibition, and I'm pleased to play you a brief message from Acting Consul General Hawar Nassim. So just bear with me, I'm gonna play the video. Okay.
You can see them, right?
Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm Hawar Nassim, Canada's Acting Consul General here in New York, and I'm honored to join our friends at Wave Hill to support this wonderful exhibit, The Shadow of the Sun, by Ross Bleckner and Zachari Logan. This exhibit resonated for us as it chronicles the relationship between two artists who have created collaborative works while living in different countries, Canada and the US. I often say that artists are our greatest ambassadors as they tell a much more vivid story than I ever could. I don't have to tell you how much cultural institutions have suffered this year, and while we've continued to support them virtually, we're keen to experience them live. So we couldn't be more thrilled that this exhibit can be viewed in person at the magnificent Wave Hill. I wish everyone the best as we emerge from this challenging year. Keep safe. Thank you. Merci.
Okay, and now I would like to introduce our fantastic panelists. Ross Bleckner is known for his large-scale paintings, which have been shown in esteemed art institutions, including the Museum of Modern Art, Astrup Fearnley, Museo Nacional Centro de Arte Reina Sofia, and the Whitney Museum of American Art. In 1994, Bleckner had a mid-career solo exhibition at the Guggenheim Museum. Zachari Logan has developed a studio practice focused on drawing, painting, ceramics, and installation. His work has been exhibited in group and solo exhibitions in the Americas, Europe, and India. His work can be found in public and private collections worldwide, including the National Gallery of Canada, Remai Modern Art Gallery of Ontario, and Leslie Lohman Museum, among others. He participated in Wave Hill's Winter Workspace program in 2016. Wayne Baerwaldt has curated and co-curated numerous exhibitions, including Under the Influence of Fluxus, Pierre Molinier, Beck and Al Hansen Playing with Matches, the Royal Art Lodge Ask the Dust, which was curated with Joseph Wallen, Marcel Zama, More Famous Drawings, Glenn Ligon, Some Changes, curated with Thelma Golden, Elaine Stokey, Balcony, and many others. Leah Taylor is curator of contemporary art at the Kenderdine Art Gallery, College Art Galleries at the University of Saskatchewan. She has curated numerous projects, including an exhibition of the work of Amalie Atkins entitled Wundermärchen that later toured to Ottawa, New York, and Vienna. And our moderator this evening is Jennifer McGregor, a New York-based curator and arts organizer, as well as the former director of arts and senior curator at Wave Hill, where she organized exhibitions and presented performances that relate to nature, culture, and sight. Recent projects include The Lightning, an immersive outdoor installation by Chris Doyle, and the exhibition Field Notes featuring projects by Matthew Friday, David McQueen, and Michelle Stewart, and many other exhibitions. So thank you all for participating in our talk. Welcome to all our panelists. Jennifer, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Gabriel. And thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. It feels a little momentous that Zoom has connected us all to be here together on what has been a sort of interesting journey. I was thinking back to the day, I think it was in July, I got a call from Julie Saul, who said, there's this artist named Zachari Logan, and you have to get him in the Winter Workspace. He is so amazing. His work is just so incredible. He's just so perfect for Wave Hill. And so it was, the next thing you know, we were on Skype back then, doing a studio visit with you. And then the next thing you know, you were here in New York and at Wave Hill in the Winter Workspace. So that was kind of our introduction to you. And of course, Ross, I have just more recently met, but have followed your work since the 80s. So this idea, when Wayne approached me with the idea for this show, which he and Leah had curated, it seemed so natural and so important that we should present it at Wave Hill. And that was, I guess Wayne, you must have been in touch back in like 2018, 2019.
Later in 2018, yeah, early 2019.
Yeah, and we were like, oh, great, we'll do it next spring, and it'll just be wonderful. And we went to talk to, you were in town for the, actually in the fall of 2019, it was coincidental that Ross had a show at Petzl and Zachary had a show at Julie Saul, and everyone was in town, and we were able to kind of get excited about this. And
everything was open.
Everything was open. The consulate was excited. This was in December. And then the next thing you know, we postponed it, as we all know, until this year. So and I feel like it's very timely to have it up right now. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a conversation. We're going to be showing some images as we go along. So you'll get a chance to see the works individually, the works at the Kenderdine Gallery in Saskatchewan, and then the works at Wave Hill. So let's start at the beginning for Ross and Zachary, which I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how you met, how you came to admire each other's work, and then launch us into the collaborative process.
Sure.
I think you should take that one.
Okay, I'll jump into that. Well, essentially, I guess I have to go way back to my first year of university when I was introduced to Ross's work through one of my mentors and still a good friend, Alison Norland. And she was showing me the work of many artists as she was the rest of the class. And for many reasons, I just sort of became very interested in Ross's work. And the other artists that Ross is emerged with. We're, working in a very large scale. We're, mostly male. But I think there was something about the sensibility in the imagery in Ross's work that always stayed with me. The use of flowers and the idea of memorials, and just a lot of the work really stayed with me for a very long time, forever really. And fast forward to 2013, I was working with a gallery in Chelsea, and I'd been asked to curate a group show. And one day, just by chance, as things sort of tend to happen in New York, I went up to the wrong floor. So I went up to the 11th floor, the gallery was on the 9th floor, and Ross Bleckner's studio was on the 11th floor. And so I came out of the elevator and I saw Ross Bleckner's studio. And I just thought to myself, and went back down to the 9th floor and was talking to Daniel, and I said, do you know Ross at all? Do you have any contact with him? And he did. He had a sort of periphery contact with Ross, and I think also with Nathan, just from being in the building. And so that's sort of how it happened. I ended up getting in contact with Ross through Daniel. And I, just sent out an email saying, I'm curating this show, and I'm
because he had a very nice dog named Rothko, who I used to pet in the elevator.
Right.
That's how I got to know him.
So yeah, so that's sort of how that all began. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't expect necessarily even to hear back from Ross, but I did, and very quickly and very generously, he said, yes, I'd love to be included in the group show. It sounds great. And also, where is Saskatchewan? And all these questions about me personally. So it was just so wonderful to get that sort of response. And then I think the next time that I was in town, for the exhibition, installing the show, Ross and I met. I did a studio visit, and it just sort of went from there. Ross, what do you think? Can you add to that?
I think that all sounds like the truth.
That kind of, that kind of sums it up.
I mean, the fact that I remember meeting you, I think we met in the space because you invited me up or something. Actually met. Yeah. I don't remember you coming to my studio though. But,
it was during that trip, but it was another.
But it's funny because sometimes people send me emails and you either respond very briefly or you don't. But something about the whole Saskatchewan thing kind of always fascinated me. I guess it all relates back to Agnes Martin and my love of the idea of dramatic landscape. So, I just was kind of curious to ask you questions like, someone else lives there?
There's a million of us, if you can believe it.
Well, now I know, now that I've been there and I saw with my own eyes, and it's, I thought really beautiful in its own extreme way.
Exactly. And I think also when it came to the, I guess I should mention when it came to the creation, or thinking about the creation of this two-person exhibition, it was a number of years between us meeting and that sort of happening. It was somewhere around 2016, I think, and having discussions with Leah about a project at the Kenderdine. But also, and then having another conversation with Wayne about the idea of us collaborating on work, but also doing a two-person show because of our sort of shared sensibilities. And all of those things sort of came together, as well with another person who I should mention is Paul Petro, who is also very interested in showing both of our works in his commercial space in Toronto. So that also was part of this. So it's many sort of moving parts and things coming together, to the creation of the show that opened at the Kenderdine and then moved to Wave Hill. And then, Jennifer came into the conversation. So it's a lot of
I think now might be a good time to just show some of the work so that we're seeing the context for the comparison of your works. So these, what we're looking at are all images that are from the show. Some of them are not at Wave Hill, but were in the show at the Kenderdine. And I think this piece was
And
not,
vice versa.
this was created since then and is at Wave Hill.
Beautiful.
And this piece is of Zachary. Maybe you can explain where this piece is from.
Oh, window number 1. Yeah, it's from the, I believe it's the, is it the education building?
The ecology.
Or, sorry, ecology building. So this was on, I took a photograph that is the source material for this drawing. And it was the first photograph I took when I was on site on my first visit to Wave Hill. There was something about the window and the haziness, because the view across is to the Palisades on the other side of the water, and it just it stuck in my mind, and it became the source of this drawing. So very, very sort of important to my history at Wave Hill, and
probably not a very frequently an image that appears in other places frequently.
Right? Yeah, I mean, it felt like a very sort of intimate moment for me in this.
Yes.
And yeah.
For all those pictures of Wave Hill, this is a kind of obscure one. So this would be a good time to talk about how you both started to collaborate and
Sure.
How these series developed.
I don't know, Ross, if I'll just sort of jump in here for a split second, and then basically just to say that when we had discussed and decided we would work on collaborations, the next conversation I think was materials. And I had mentioned paper. And I remember, Ross, we were at your studio and you said, well, I don't really work on paper. And then we all started to sort of excavate your flat files and found hundreds and hundreds of incredible works on paper. And you said, oh my God, I forgot about this. So that was sort of how paper became, I think, a main part of the collaborations. I don't know if you want to.
I guess I suggested this. This was a series of prints that I did in actually in Spain, where I used images from New York Times obituaries. So they kind of reflect, obviously, on mortality, and some are very specific that I've saved. But I've always been, for whatever reason, ever since I'm a teenager, I've really just liked reading the obituaries of the New York Times. So sometimes I use them. I like actually here in the middle, it's Dr. Donald Kaplan. It's a kind of commemoration of his life. He was a psychoanalyst who taught at NYU. I happened to have been in psychoanalysis with him, and he was just a wonderful teacher to me. So, I did a painting from this, and I just like using them kind of in the Buddhist sense, that the reflection and the acknowledgement of dying makes your life have more meaning every day. So, that's what these prints were about. And some of them I put like that reflective surface. So when you're looking at the print, you're actually seeing yourself, like the one on the left, with a date. And then I took tape and I crossed out the date, because when you're looking at yourself, there is going to be a date, but nobody knows when.
Yeah. And Ross, I knew about this work, and I was both interested and sort of honored that you that you would suggest that we sort of work on these, which at the time felt very much like finished works in and of themselves, and they were.
Well, yeah, they are, but
They
you know,
are,
it's like
right.
I have a bunch of them, and I kind of use them, and I kind of repurpose them.
Right. And I think I should also mention that those two first pieces of the first slide, these were done from a distance. So Ross sent these to me, and I worked on both of the surfaces and sent them back, and then Ross worked further. So it was sort of it was an interesting way to actually start the whole process of collaboration between New York and Regina. And then I guess this I should say the second series of
These we did together,
we
right?
did together.
When you were here.
Yeah.
Then Zachary came here to my studio, which I am now in East Hampton, Long Island, New York. And he brought his pastel paper and his beautiful pastels. And he started, or I forget who started, or I started. And
Yeah.
we just kind of worked off of each other.
Yeah, it felt actually rather organic. I think there was one point where we were staring at blank pieces of paper, and I think you said, well, what should we do? And we just sort of, I think one of us worked on one and one of us worked on another, and we just sort of traded them back and forth. And to me, it felt, I don't know how you would describe it, but it felt like a conversation.
Well, yeah, that's
Materials,
like
right?
when you have work up in your studio.
Yeah.
And things start to tell you what each one needs, maybe. Yeah. I mean, they look good to me.
I agree.
Okay, good.
And I think there was one point during the process, because I think we had 5 days together doing these, where you sort of banished me. You said, you said, go to the, you sent me to the Pollock Krasner house, which was great.
It wasn't a banishment, that was a field trip.
It was, I know. You came back because you were working between the collaborations and your own paintings in the other side of the studio. And you came back and you said, oh, you've done too much, get out of here.
Oh, yeah.
Which was great. I mean, it's amazing to be out there as someone who doesn't live out there and doesn't get the chance to be out there all that often, because there's just so much incredible rich history to the surrounding area. And really, the Krasner Pollock house is a neighboring house to you. As
is the
bike ride,
the Pollock house, the de Kooning house.
Yeah.
And,
I sat on a bench when I was just recently in the Hamptons, when I went for that bike ride on the first day, and I turned around and looked at what it said on the bench, and it was a bench commemorating the life of de Kooning. So
nice.
Yeah. So all of these works, the second series of collaborations, if that's what we're going to call them, they all happened over that 5 or 6 day period back in 2018.
And this is one that started, it looks like, with a print that I had done. And we kind of overlaid what's that, whatever that paper. Mylar over it, and you worked on it and I worked on it. And then I see, it looks like I collaged one of my palettes on it.
Yeah. Basically
a palette that I turn into little paintings at the end, or little drawings. I looks like I was using white and I put it in 2 little eyes, or.
So this might be a good place to talk about how this body of work came from the studio and arrived in Canada. So Wayne and Leah, do you want to talk a little bit about how this show came together, and how, from artists whose work is so, both Zachary and Ross are so prolific, how you selected the bodies of work that you did, and kind of how you saw the sort of weaving through of
Mm.
ideas around loss and memory in their work.
Sure, yeah. I can start a little bit, Wayne, and then I'll hand it
Sure,
off to you.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, much like Zachary, he gave a really good lead up to how this whole conversation transpired. But I was scheduled to do a studio visit with Zachary in 2016 at the University of Regina, where he had his studio at the time. And I was going essentially to talk to him about the idea of a solo exhibition in the college art galleries at the university. And at the time, you know, he was working on quite a few pieces, but he also had the collaborative works, the New York Times pieces. So the two, almost like a diptych that we were seeing that Ross spoke to. And I think it was still in the works. You had just received them from Ross and you were yet to send them back through the mail. And it seemed like such a fascinating collaboration. And you had already been sort of talking to Wayne in the background of this about other exhibition possibilities, and Paul, that this two-person show was emerging in some way. And so it seemed like it was an interesting proposition and something I didn't quite anticipate. And then Wayne and I began a further conversation curatorially about how to, knowing that this would be a really big project, it seemed like it would be stronger if we brought everyone in together working on it. And so that's kind of how the initial conversation evolved in 2016. And then the exhibition didn't show until 2018. So certainly there was a lot of back and forth. And at the time, I think I went to Banff for a 6-month residency, and Wayne visited me there multiple times. And that's where we made a lot of selections through large meetings where we had, Ross has some major catalogs and a huge inventory to look at, and Zachary was working really prolifically. And so we had a lot of work that was the potential. So continuing to sort of revisit this initial curatorial premise of thinking about their motifs that had similarities, and that interplay of floral motifs and beauty, loss. So Wayne,
absolutely. I think that's pretty accurate. It's also accurate. I think Zachary, you mentioned too, there were many moving parts to this. So Paul Petro was definitely interested, and it really seeing those the first two collaborative pieces that came together, the New York Obituaries 1 and 2, before you even started drawing on, so to speak, Ross's work, Zachary, we were excited. Like, these were the pieces, the two prints were so perfect as they were, Ross. I think there was a bit of a freak out moment.
I was terrified.
There. Remember? And I thought that was wonderful and exciting and energizing. And then what you did with them and with Ross was so exciting that it just got me energized.
You could say that Zachary brought the obituaries back to life.
Really? Very accurate. Very accurate. So I think this idea of, shared sensibilities and concerns became so apparent right from the beginning. And then, of course, I was in New York with Paul Petro and Steve Smart, actually, Zachary, with your broken ankle, I think. We did a studio visit, and really that opened things up when we saw the prints that had been somehow lost in your memory banks, Ross. We thought they were so wonderful, and you thought, well, maybe they're kind of, not as important as you think, but we loved them. Everything we did. We were excited about them all over again. And all the paintings that were coming out, and your very generous nature in discussing the process, including the burning, of surfaces and the scraping, and just allowing us sort of that inside track was, I think, really important. So that was part of it, but also I think, Leah, we had time to reflect and do research. So looking at Richard Malazzo's hefty book from 2007, The Paintings of Ross Bleckner, if you remember that, Ross. Wonderful.
That I remember.
Wonderful stuff. And even the Guggenheim catalog from the retrospective, that includes Thomas Crowe's work and Simon Watney, who I knew in the day. I still think their essays have a certain intensity and resonance that was so important, to exciting us. but also informing us about the kind of work you did during the so-called AIDS era, during the epidemic, the height of the epidemic. And that sort of material was brought forward too. So also then since that, of course, there's so much material out there. And Robert Enright and Mika Walsh with Border Crossings did a wonderful interview with you, Ross, and also Zachary with you. Very illuminating, so for our research. And then I remember talking to Glenn Lagon some time ago about his blue-black show at the Pritzker Foundation in St. Louis, and he included your work in that. And that got me excited, of course, because I often think that Glenn is a bit of a barometer for what's fantastic and important in terms of painting. So that was, again, it's good we had time, to think, reflect, go through a lot of material. Leah and I just sifted through so many hundreds of possibilities, of course. And Nathan, in the studio, in your studio, Ross, kind of gave us an impression of what's possible, what's impossible, what's in Dubai, what's in a private collection that will never come out, all those sort of logistical issues. But I think one of the things we looked at was this sense of luminosity in your work, Ross, that almost comes from inside a painting. It was so startling to see some of the works in person, of course. We've seen reproductions, which are also convincing. And Zachary, too, in terms of your silhouettes, or the way you silhouette foliage and floral arrangements, there's something there about luminosity that came through that, of course, would have us look at a checklist differently and make up a checklist differently. And then, of course, there's the art historical references, Ross, in your work to Monet, for example, your long ongoing study of Monet's works. And Zachary too, of course, if you're looking at anything from the foliage and weeds that you find at the ditches of Saskatchewan to Mary Delaney's, super amazing cutout collage works, her floral arrangements. I think that was certainly something too that, of course, had us clue into certain works that we had to have in the show, including, and we've looked at it once already, the piece from, the Untitled piece from 2010, where this floral arrangement of yours, Ross, is, if you can go back, Eileen, to that image from the first section of images, where the floral arrangement, in my mind, the landscape is exploding. I don't know if you're able to bring that one up.
Yeah.
Just, again, one of those exciting moments where Leah and I said, we have to have that painting. How do we get that painting? And of course, Nathan was very helpful in making that happen. So then in the back of our minds too, after we understood that Zachary was at Wave Hill and we got an impression of what Wave Hill was like, it became imperative to approach Jennifer and see if something could happen there, because it just seemed to complete our idea of what an exhibition of your works should be about. The Wave Hill as a garden refuge, as a place for memorials, a place for contemplation, and everything seemed to come together after the fact, after the show in Saskatoon, which was fantastic in itself, but came together again as a revised understanding, knowing that we were going to be in a garden setting. So it was, and then the ceramic works, of course, made sense there. New work made sense. The, so to speak, collaborative wall drawing, Zachary, that you did at Wave Hill with Ross's fantastic painting on top of part of the wall, that work right there.
Nice.
So again, these are some of the ideas that we were ruminating on and concerns we were ruminating on, but also, again, just having the, on my part, having the support from the University of Saskatchewan, College Art Galleries, and Jeremy Morgan and Jake Moore, supporting my research, it gave me time to put together something, to think about these collaborations, to think about the edition, and try to produce it properly, and to produce a fantastic catalog with Bar Gilmore. So again, and you know, to have a rapport with Paul Petro and Steve Smart about the work and other people about the work. So, you know, sometimes when we're lodged in institutions, we have to turn something around in 9 months or 6 months or 6 weeks, and it never quite feels like a complete project. So I'm thankful that I was able to collaborate with Leah, and we were able to have this back and forth that included the included Ross. And Ross, can you hear? No, you can't. Anyway, that's okay. Those are a few of my insights into the process, Jennifer.
I did want to ask you about the title, "The Shadow of the Sun," which is, it's so evocative, and it is, you have a really wonderful explanation for it in your essay in the catalog, but perhaps you could share your that wonderful reference with us.
Yeah, Ryszard Kapuscinski is a journalist, a Polish journalist, and a writer, something in my mind in the vein of Paul Theroux as a travel writer, but someone who really, you know, took the back roads and met the people, in this case, of Africa, of the countries of Africa. And I came across this book by the same title, The Shadow of the Sun, simply by chance at a sale. And I was so captivated by the cover photograph, which I should mention for the sake of posterity, by Françoise Huguier, Huguier. And it was well, maybe I'll just show it. Why not?
Well, yeah, that's what Zoom is for.
The impression, but you see that there is no shadow there. The sun, it's implied anyway, that the African sun is coming straight down. And if you see objects there, the dugout canoe, the human figure, the camel in the background, there's no shadow. The sun has obliterated the shadow. It's that intense. And I was really interested, again, a chance find and a chance reading. And I thought how interesting that he should take on, in part in this book, the qualities of the sun and what it means to life in Africa, and how people need the shade of foliage, of trees, of course, to survive. Otherwise, there is no surviving. And that leads in a circuitous way as well to discussing other components of life, you know, the essentials of life, which is water, which is something that is supposedly, as far as I can tell, something that's in crisis, you know, in Africa, African countries, you know, to this day. So I was, you know, interested in this term, you know, the title, The Shadow of the Sun, as something of a paradox. And I thought it's kind of perfect in my mind for the way I was reading Zachary's work and Ross's work. So in a sense, the title is, you know, certainly acknowledging some of those qualities, you know, you can't quite put your finger on them, about light and shadow and some sort of, I don't know, spiritual quality that's in between the two. And, you know, and it's a bit of an homage to Rapushinsky's, you know, observations on light and the fleeting nature of shade, you know, in Africa. So it seemed to me to be, you know, a bit of a transfer of metaphors, you know, that was kind of essential to, again, reading Ross's work and Zachary's work. So yeah, that's how that came about.
And light is such an important feature in both of their works. So
absolutely,
it seems very fitting. You also mentioned the, you know, this connection with flowers and nature is not something I think that people would normally think, oh, let's put Ross's work next to Zachary's work in that context. But I think that the presentation at Wave Hill, particularly because it is in a garden, as you mentioned, does kind of draw out that thread of connectivity between their work.
I think so, both figurative and abstract, so to speak, abstract work, you know, and some would argue that all, you know, depictions, all representation is figurative for that matter. But there were exciting opportunities at Wave Hill too. If you notice, again, the Untitled piece from 2010, sitting between, if I remember correctly, two windows.
Perfectly.
So if you're a viewer looking out the window and seeing this incredible garden setting, and then this explosion of floral arrangements, it's so, they're not necessarily incongruous. There's something, the way one's reading the landscape through those windows might not be so incongruous with that painting after all, even though there's, it's suggesting that they are different. I think they're both the live landscape and the representation in the quasi-abstract work are similar in ways. So it was a wonderful opportunity, to look at how nature is depicted, represented by Zachary and Ross, and see that the figurative work and the representational work had crossover points.
Mm-hmm.
I think that becomes obvious when you look at some of the very densely layered imagery in Zachary's work that in my mind goes from figurative to very abstract.
Yeah.
So again, by just having two settings at the University of Saskatchewan and at Wave Hill just gave us a chance to really think about how Ross and Zachary were working, as solo artists, of course, but then how wonderfully easy the collaboration seemed. And you don't always see that, that doesn't come naturally necessarily between artists.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a wonderful adventure.
And it's interesting for me to see the iteration at Wave Hill. I didn't see it in person, but just seeing how the work is responding to the architecture of the space, it really takes on a whole different feeling for the exhibition. But the one piece I just was wondering maybe if Zachary could just quickly touch on it, because it is the only sculptural element essentially in the exhibition. If you want to talk about how Fountain has transferred from both places, but it's also an ongoing artwork and you've been working on it for a number of years. I just thought maybe you could quickly talk about that piece because it is such a unique placement within the exhibition.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess I feel like it became very quickly a focal point in the exhibition, initially, and then, in this space as well. But I guess I should say, just as this is a point of reference, my body is always the catalyst for my work, regardless of whether or not there's a depiction of myself or not. But when it comes to the materials in this piece, this piece actually started in 2013. And so it really is about a passage of time, because every time I show it, I add more flowers. So it, continues to pile. And the bone color of the ceramic, so it's vitrified clay, but it hasn't been glazed or touched otherwise. And it was just that reference to the human body, because for me, it's this very similar to the color of bones. So there's several, intersecting points to this piece that come together. One is the experience of Oscar Wilde's grave. So in 2009, my husband Ned and I visited Père Lachaise when we were in Paris for an exhibition. And upon approaching it, I thought it was covered with red moss. And it turned out that it was actually lipstick. So people had put lipstick on and kissed the tomb. And sort of, for me, it was like this inflaming of this tomb, all of these people coming together and sort of changing this monument, sort of one kiss at a time. And I found that to be so remarkable an experience. But it also has a link to the landscape in Saskatchewan, and also my body as a settler. And so that the idea of repetition and piling comes back to images of buffalo bones on the prairies, in particular in Saskatchewan, across the prairies and into the US, when the sort of colonial powers of Canada were, trying to settle Saskatchewan and other places. So it comes right back to the implications of my own body in the place where I live, and how I'm affected by it and it's affected by me. And so I think for me and for for yourself and Wayne, it sort of just made sense connecting to other works and other ideas that overlap in the exhibition. And having it at Wave Hill too, it is kind of, every time I put it together, it's almost like I'm putting together a bouquet. And sometimes things break and it becomes a very different piece. And I just, yeah, I mean, that's sort of, yeah.
It absolutely does have this sense of the memorial or the commemorative to it. And yeah. I think what you haven't noted too is that you mentioned the buffalo bones. Well, the Canadian government was out to eradicate the buffalo, the main source of food for the native peoples.
Yes.
In fact, to starve them off the prairies. So again, this idea of you using, even in an unconscious way, this idea of bone-colored flowers as a tribute, as a commemoration, a sad commemoration, yes. has another set of roots, into our subconscious. And I think you sometimes we gloss over the many connections through the subconscious that are existing here. So again, it's such a fantastic piece that actually started in Alberta at the Alberta College of Art and Design.
It did.
Through an invitation to work in the studios, the ceramic studios there. But anyway.
Yeah, and I think also the piece relates to other works that were in the other exhibition, in particular the eunuch tapestry piece that's not included at the Wave Hill show. And really this fountain, the area around the base of the fountain sort of becomes like a teeming ditch. And the ditches are really the idea of the ditch and that sort of overlapping sense of a liminal space that's queer on the prairies that I sort of adapt and bring into my own language. It exists here, I think, as the base of the fountain, and it keeps growing or changing or morphing with every show.
Well, you also talk about the metaphor of the weeds and how some of your hybrid contents are actually weeds, and of course, what are weeds? What does that mean to you?
Well, why is a weed a weed? A weed is deemed a weed because it has no sort of human purpose for consumption, but it still has a very real purpose for existing and thriving. And in the context of Saskatchewan, the weeds are pushed to the margins along the sides of the roads, right? A lot of people will come to Saskatchewan and think it's completely untouched, and it's this sort of vast barren landscape that's untouched by human eyes, hands, whatever, but it actually is completely manufactured for human consumption. And it's that farming, that manufacture that sort of pushes those weeds to the margins. So for me, the weeds become a representation of queerness in a way, of that thriving in the margin. So all of that sort of comes into the work in different ways. And consciously, unconsciously, like you're saying, Wayne.
One thing I just wanted to touch on in regards to having the exhibition here in Saskatchewan was that Ross was able to come and visit for a number of days. And so I think that's an interesting element of your collaboration, is that you've gone to Ross's studio, but now Ross, you've also been to the prairies and seen where, Zachary's from, and like some of these relationships that he's bringing into his work, you were able to experience. And your visit here was obviously profound and affected so many faculty and students and community who were thrilled to have this opportunity to meet you and hear from you in person. We had a great
and sorry to interrupt, Leah, but our visit to Emma Lake. The connections that existed previously between New York and Saskatchewan.
Mm-hmm. Ross, do you want to touch on that, your experience here, or Emma Lake? Is there anything that you can?
Oh, it was all, I mean, one of the reasons I like to have a show in places that have a show is if I'm interested in traveling there. That's certainly, like a great reason. And I was really I just was really interested in that, in that kind of the horizon there, and I guess there's a mythology to it, a kind of, you think about it. And I mean, it wasn't, I was hoping to see, those lights. What are those things at night? But,
The
Northern
Northern
Lights.
Lights. Yeah.
So you have all these ideas that, to hear Zachary talk about it kind of deflates all the fantasy. I didn't realize it's so manicured with the weeds stuck on the side, and so actually like
Ruining a.
yeah, but it didn't look like that. I mean, it kind of looks like it has looked for centuries when you're driving around outside the city.
Also, Ross, you saw it in the winter when it is a little more difficult to see those sort of manicured lines.
It was
It does
October.
become, yeah,
It's a large area to manicure. That's all I got. All I know is one little lawn is difficult to deal with.
Right.
Leah, I'm just wondering if you could talk about the legacy of Emma Lake and its association with the University of Saskatchewan.
Sure, yeah. So Emma Lake is just outside the city, and it was an artist retreat that existed for many years, initially started by the University of Saskatchewan and Augustus Kenderdine, who is obviously the namesake of our gallery, Kenderdine Art Gallery. And it closed a number of years ago. When we saw it, it was actually already shuttered. So you got a sense of how, it was sort of already a past memory, but it had art camps each summer for years and years. And it was also known to be a spot that invited many important faculty. Each year it was led by certain faculty. And so there's a long history of modernist painting that's come out of there, both prairie modernists, and there was also a really sort of fruitful exchange with painters from New York. And so Clement Greenberg had come a number of times as a visiting critic. And this is part of the sort of legacy and history that people are.
Frank Stella was there. If
Yeah.
we could just name a few names. Frank Stella was there.
Barnett Newman,
Barnett Newman.
John Cage.
Sir Anthony Caro.
John Cage was there. Yeah. Carol. Just to mention a few names. So it was a significant link, and that's something we tried to convey to Ross as well, and he's certainly part of that link now.
Well, I didn't get to have a residency at Emma Lake. That would be nice, but I guess those
We'll
days
bring
are
you
over.
back. We'll bring
Those
you back.
days are over.
Ross.
Yeah,
There's-
I mean, it's
there's-
really a beautiful place to stay
Yeah.
for a while and make some art, I would imagine. And that's why I'm sure Barnett Newman appreciated it.
Exactly.
There was actually a famous quote, it should probably be stated, and it was Barnett Newman, and he said, who the hell is Emma Lake and where the hell is Saskatchewan?
That's a good one.
It's a good
Yeah, but I mean, it was just nice to be there and to look around. And we went to the other place that I thought was really fascinating. With the all the trees that are all gnarled up.
So Ned and I took Ross to a place called the Crooked Bush, which is this anomaly of trees, like a cluster of birch trees that grow in a gnarl. It's just
like in the middle of nowhere for no reason.
Yeah, and it's a biological anomaly in a way, and so it was within range for us to take Ross to see this, and we talked to him about it, and he was like very interested in seeing it. So we went there and walked through it, and it's really remarkable, spot among many. I mean, there are many really gorgeous spots in Saskatchewan, and over this past year, Ned and I have seen some of them. Like we researched what was the largest tree in Saskatchewan. What happens to be a gorgeous, massive cottonwood. So we drove out to it. This was part of our sort of COVID holidays to see the province. But so anyway, we took Ross out to see that. But also, I think Ross, I remember you had some comments just about the openness and being, the drive out there and seeing so few people in the
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm very curious about particularly, artists and how they live and where they live. And it kind of is fascinating to me that, it's pretty remote and many artists are there. And we visited some, I remember. And I just found it fascinating that the different lives artists lead and the different ways that they have practice. And, you know, I mean, one of the things that just seemed very kind of perversely attractive was the fact that it gets so cold that I guess you have nothing else to do for many months except stay in your studio. Kind of like 2020 was everywhere.
I think I'm seeing maybe this is like a TV series, or that you can be offering tours or even another exhibition about, you know, sort of working, you know, how artists work under these extreme conditions.
Well, I mean, it's also the extreme condition in a way is to be so remote, because when I was in graduate school, I mean, now things are somewhat, you can be an artist and you can have a life and a career. But when I was in graduate school in the 70s, the advice was New York, period. And that doesn't work for a lot of people for many reasons. Now it's not that anymore. I mean, I was there when John Baldessari, who was an LA artist, was saying, if you want to have a career, you can't stay in LA. But that changed. He was a teacher of mine in Cal Arts. And then people started staying in LA because the infrastructure was there, and the schools, Cal Arts, UCLA, what's the other one? The art, what? The Art Center, what? Yeah.
Otis Art Institute.
Pasadena.
Yeah, those are the two. And like Mike Kelly and that generation kind of all stayed in LA. And now look at LA, you know. And it's the same anywhere, Berlin or London. And I mean, obviously Saskatchewan is not a main center for, you know, like cultural activity, but the point is there's so many ways to communicate now and to kind of, for people to see your work. You're not just limited to like gatekeepers in one specific area coming to your studio.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think you can also say too, just as an adjoiner, Zachary, I think you treat the airport in Saskatchewan as a living room. You're constantly coming and going.
A bit.
So when we are able to
We have to move around a lot. Well, anybody does if they're showing internationally. Right?
Absolutely. You have to come and go constantly. And that's just absolutely the way it is for a lot of artists here. And Marie Lanoux is the artist that we went to see in Saskatoon.
Great studio visit with Marie Lanoux. Yeah.
Yeah. And she absolutely.
That was really great. Her work, I thought, was beautiful.
Fantastic work. Yeah. And Marie Lanoux is one that uses the airport like a living room too. I mean, she's coming and going, and rightfully so. She does fantastic work. So
I actually I have a question, if I could, for Ross.
Yeah.
It's just about that the painting that wasn't in the first show at the Kenderdine, but is in this show, and it's called Canada. And it's obviously a painting that he did sort of in his response to visiting Canada, I'm assuming. So it's a painting that I think showed initially at Paul Petro and is now in Paul's private collection. But that piece is stunning, as all your work is. But I would really like to hear you talk a little bit about it, if you don't mind.
Of course not. I mean, it probably just had to do with the convenience and the immediacy of the memory of having been in Canada. And maybe I probably came from an image or a picture I took of some branches or something, because that's usually how I work. And it more than the image, because I see it, you know, I mean, I guess, you know, it is an image, but it also has to do with the focal point being not descriptive. It's somewhere out there in that white light where the horizon meets the sky, and you're kind of looking out into the distance. And that's kind of what I remember, you know, the kind of merging of lights. I mean, probably not everywhere in Canada, but definitely that day that we were driving around and, you know, it was snowing a little and the sky was white. So, you know, all you see is like a kind of endlessness through what is in front of you. Like if you're walking through the gnarly trees, you know, that's
Right.
kind of the immediate, and then you have the out there-ness.
Mhm.
So I think that's why I called it Canada.
Yeah, and because it's to me it's
Maybe I should have called it Saskatchewan.
no,
I couldn't spell it.
The title is perfect, but for me it feels, as much as it feels like it's sourced from an image, it feels like it's sourced from a feeling and a memory
Mhm.
because of that.
Well, that's what it is. And, you know, and then the use of the iridescence is a kind of light that's kind of very, I mean, I hate to use, I'm sure the word mystical doesn't really apply, but, you know, in a generic sense, I'm using that word, not in a, you know, kind of religious sense.
Well, also your eye doesn't really fix on any one particular thing in it. Like your eye kind of does what you just described, where you sort of go back and forth, and there's not really a real horizon. You're sort of looking up and down and around.
Yeah, a lot of my work kind of has to do with the indistinguishableness of how images kind of cohere and then dissolve. You know, there's that place where they represent something and they are something, and then suddenly they kind of disappear into the fog, so to speak.
Do any of you have other questions for each other before we open it up to the audience?
I have another question for, it's essentially for Zachary, and I just want to ask you, at Wave Hill, I can see that you're now expanding off the page, completely off, out of the frame, if you will, onto the walls. And I'm wondering, that was something that happened after the 2018 exhibition in Saskatoon, and obviously it's something you're working on in your practice. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a bit about what's taken you to sort of break the frame.
What's going on? Well, I think I've done this, I think 2 or 3 times now, and actually I have a project coming up this fall at the Ramey Modern, where I will do a similar sort of drawing installation. Well, I won't say similar, but I will be doing something on the walls, and I think it may be related to you know, my thinking about things being time-based, you know, like life, everything. You know, 1 minute it's there, the next minute it's gone. So, you know, to take, you know, a week and to work on this drawing again and again and again, there's something meditative about it. And then there's also something in the purpose of it that it will at one point disappear. So you will see it in photographs, but it's going to be painted over. And that is the point of it. It is to be there and then disappear. So that's kind of where I'm at right now in my thinking about these site-specific drawings that end up on the walls. But also it was such a treat, a joy to get to work with the architecture of Wave Hill, because it's such a remarkable space. So just even to wrap around the contours of the 2 doors, which was something that happened, you know, not at the last minute, but, you know, I got in there and I decided, yeah, I need to wrap around these. I need to really to sort of give contour to the drawing and have it wrap around these doors the way that I did it. So it sort of shifted a little bit while I was working on it. So it's really just about a passage of time and a sense of things being there and then being gone.
Well, it's interesting because there are many layers of drawings on the Wave Hill Glendor Gallery walls.
And I love that too. Right.
And I find that they do remain in people's memories. Like visitors will come and remember, you know, they'll remember them. And there's a sense of awe that, like, you know, Zachary spent a whole week here drawing. Well, you could have spent a week drawing in the studio too, but it's like, it's a way of being able to draw for a public in a sense and collaborate with the space.
Yeah.
And the architecture of Glendor Gallery really allows for a lot of really, you know, just interesting discoveries like you found, where you can sort of think you're going to do one thing, but it's almost more improv.
Yeah.
To be able to work like that.
Yeah. And to be open to it.
You probably are familiar with Rebecca Belmore's work, but
absolutely,
she did an installation in that same room.
What?
In I want to say 20.
Writing it down.
2002 or 3. And she just kind of showed up and was like, okay, I have a week to do the installation, and found some like these like log slices and laid them out, and then sort of went to the store and got velvet. And I mean,
amazing.
You know, people were like, are you going to do a performance? And I said, you know, we got to watch the Rebecca Belmore performance all week long because we watched her create this piece. So it is it's a very fruitful way of working.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had no idea. And Rebecca Belmore is one of my very favorite artists. Remarkable artist. Yeah. I also wanted to say about that particular piece, just one more thing, and it's the materials, which are graphite. So in this instance, this drawing is also related to surfaces. So surfaces are very important to me. And they're also, I know, very important to Ross. And so the remarkable surfaces that Ross's paint creates is sort of related to a couple of the, I'll say, bits of alchemy that are in Ross's studio. Mm-hmm. So the way that he mixes paint and uses silver and graphite and things, you know, to create these remarkable surfaces. It was something that I also wanted to just sort of you know, play on or be in conversation with. So the way that surfaces, a lot of the surfaces in the exhibition, whether it's, you know, my pastel drawing or Ross's paintings or some of the collaborations that create these sort of almost like specters, right? So as you move across the drawing, the graphite drawing in that room, which is just flooded with light, the drawing changes. And it's no different than looking at a Ross Bleckner painting in person. The surfaces are so remarkable and luminescent. They change. They change continually as your body moves across the painting. So I just wanted to also sort of, have a bit of that conversation about materials, and it's why the graphite sort of overlaps or goes underneath the painting as well.
There are a couple of questions that people have typed. I just wanted to point out.
Oh yeah.
So
great.
We answered. Paul Petro had a question about the painting Canada, which you answered. But there's another question that's directed at Ross. Untitled 2010 seems very different from much of your other work. Could you talk about the painting and what inspired you to create it?
I don't remember. What? The one on paper, like big and
yeah,
and mounted on aluminum.
Yeah,
Yes.
Can you pull that up, that image up, Eileen?
that on the right.
The one right, yeah, that one. Oh.
No. It's the one in the center, in the largest.
On the aluminum.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
here.
The one on the right.
I think
yeah.
around I did a series, a whole group of them, really, a lot of them. I just found this paper. I had this paper made actually that was coated with like a photographic
Emulsion. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I know it came from like erasing things. A lot of my paintings have to do with, you know, like the layering and the kind of putting things on and taking things away. So it's almost what's left with, I always say, is like really not a flower, but it's kind of like it was something, then it's now just a mark, a painted mark. You know, so it's like a memory of a flower, really. You know, thereafter they're gone, that's what's left. And I basically painted on them and wiped it off so that the paper itself, the emulsion on the paper, would come off when I kind of went over it with, you know, like chemicals. So yeah, I was able to go back into the light from the dark, which is also something I like to do. A lot of times I'll start paintings by painting them black, and then try to, almost like, you know, sculpture, try to find their way out in light, and it kind of keeps going. So yeah, these are paintings, these are on paper, mounted on aluminum. And I mean, they do relate to my flower paintings. It's just, you know, it's just a subject that I don't really think of the flowers so much as just ways, new approaches and new ways to try to make a painting. And a kind of flower is a stand-in for, you know, any mark really. But I mean, since I happen to really love the painting of, let's say, El Greco or Manet or Monet, you know, it gives me the opportunity to reference that as well. So kind of reference history and just have a memory of what it was. And
well, thank you for that explanation, because it was so amazing when we took it out of the crate and had it on the table, and we're looking at it, you know, sort of flat, and all trying to figure out how you had done it. So now we know.
yeah. And I think that's like 6 pieces of paper.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
kind of like,
No, they're
yeah.
and
that's
it's
why I
very
mounted
heavy.
It's heavy. And then I mounted them, and then, yeah, and then painted on them more.
Yeah.
Our viewers had a similar response. They were totally mesmerized and trying to figure out what medium it was. And even with a label there, I mean, because there's a certain shine, like a sort of glazed shine quality to it that makes it very difficult to peg. And it is very stunning in real life as well. This image is great, but you need to see it in person.
Yeah.
And also the place where it is at Wave Hill, it feels made for it. I mean, it just fits so.
Yeah, no, I mean, that room.
There's
Yeah,
a sort of
so
panel around the edge, so it just.
Yeah, I mean,
it
just to
fits.
look at that and then to see that in the other room, it's almost like that is the beginning of the disappearance. And here it's kind of just the vapor.
Yeah.
In that smaller painting, you know, it's like really just the light that was left by something that grew and then finished. You know, so it has to do with that little bit of cosmic light that things generate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, I don't really like to speak like that, but sometimes it's okay.
When you're warmed up.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to define. Let's just say it like that.
Yeah.
And we do have a question from Eileen, our curator of visual arts. Eileen, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. I was just wondering, when Zachary and Ross, when you were collaborating in Ross's studio, what was that process like? Like, I've read that I think you both were silent, or were there some conversation between the two of you? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Ross?
I'm sure there was conversation, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm used to people being in my studio. I like when people are in my studio. I mean, you know, studios get lonely sometimes when you're working a lot. So if friends come over or assistant is there, it's fine. Yeah, so, you know, a lot of times when you're working or someone's working in a studio, you're basically talking to yourself out loud. normally if they're not there, it's not out loud. So I probably did a lot of talking to Zachary that maybe he didn't even listen to, but we talked.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, you know, I'm very, I would say on the slight OCD side in my studio.
Yeah.
Which really goes well with pastel.
Well,
Oh
I'm
my
a mess.
God, it was driving me crazy.
I'm an absolute mess in my studio. And there was a point where Ross was like, okay, we have to stop. We have to pause, and you have to clean up your area because I can't concentrate. And I am a mess. I do not think about, you know, I'm covered in pastel at the end of the day, and I often come home and that is like, wow, not only can I tell that you were, you know, touching your face to but you weren't wearing a mask because it's on the tip of your nose. No, but yeah, so we had conversations about many things. It was very fluid. Not everything was about the collaborations while we were doing them, but also there were a lot of people coming and going. And my experience of Ross's studio, it is very dynamic. He does have people continually coming and going. One story I'd love to share is that who walks in one day, I think on day 3, but Barbara Kruger. and he just walks her over to me, and I knew exactly who she was, but I didn't want to fangirl. And just said, "This is Barbara." And I said, "Hi, Barbara, I'm Zachary." But of course inside, but I kept it to myself. But yeah, so it was, there was a lot of different conversations going on. Sure.
About him keeping his area clean too.
Over and over.
Because, you know, it's the way I work is like, you know, I put everything that I'm preparing to work around me so that I could just kind of focus on that thing. And even though I put everything in a place and I get ready, as soon as I need it, somehow I can't find it. So some days I spend all day walking back and forth at my studio looking for things. You know, this is why I like to keep it pretty well organized. So, you know, I know where this is, or I know where that color is. I know where that brush is.
He also walks around with a whole thing of Bounty in his hand, which is great.
I live without my Bounty.
Cleanser. I have one question since it's Pride Month, and
it is.
It just
A whole month.
I know, a whole month now. It's not just one weekend, but actually, this is for you. This starts with you, Ross. This is something you exclaimed to me a number of years ago, and it's sort of stuck with me. Only a gay man could make paintings like mine. And I thought that was, and I thought it was interesting because, you know, Joe Wallen has commented on this as well, this idea that painting and materials can imprint a visible trace on of the artist's interiority onto the support surface. And I thought, yeah, but I never asked you to explain, and I thought I'd ask Zachary too to talk about this queer sensibility that comes through the collaborative works, your individual works, and what can you say about that?
Well, I mean, essentially it boils down to who you are. And that's what gets into your work. You know, your personality and your being actually is your work. So I think that there is particularly like all of the artists that I kind of came of age with in the 80s, their work kind of participated in this kind of ethos of the heroic expressionist. It was like a kind of leftover, and I liked it all, but it seems so antithetical to me and to my sensibility, and even to the time, really. It's not really what people were looking for that I knew. And it, you know, like it's a lot of like, you know, chest flexing and posturing and, you know, and I wanted to kind of disconnect from that pretty clearly. And I was obviously able to just because of who I am. And I wanted to do paintings that were less focused on me and who I am, my expressionism, and more focused on the kind of things that are uncertain, really, that are negotiable, that are, as people would say now, that are fluid on the spectrum, in terms of identity, what's visible, what's invisible. And, that's when I started doing those optical paintings, because they kind of collapsed, for me, the idea of imagery. You couldn't see anything, but yet you can see a lot. It was background, foreground. So it really had to do with, and then after that came the AIDS crisis. And I felt that, that I had to be a little more direct and not really be making abstract paintings as much, because I felt it was one of those ruptures in time, not just for gay people, just for people, which had to do with the vulnerability of our lives here on Earth and how easily and quickly things could turn around. And oddly enough, it's like my life has basically been lived between two pandemics. I mean, I was young then, and I'm not as young now. So, it's the same thing happened on a more general population scale recently, where all our ideas about what is normal, real, how our lives are supposed to unfold, suddenly kind of become about uncertainty, which is what it is anyway to begin with. And
This
I
is
think
just a
that,
reminder.
what?
It's
Yeah,
just
it's a reminder. But the things that I put into my work then as a gay man, I think we're maybe had to do with this different kinds of sentiment. A different, like even using flowers, kind of was weird, because I think it was like not sentimental. I mean, the idea of sentiment then was very, I suppose, difficult for some people. I mean, but I had no other way to express it, And anyway, I looked at the last flowers of Manet, and I thought, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
If Manet could do it, so could I.
And Zachary, could you add to that?
Well, actually, just to say one thing first, when it was great to hear you talk about your work, Ross, and the progressions. And I think one of the main obvious reasons why I sort of became very interested and attached to your work, Ross, was because of the imagery, because of what you were doing that was so different to your contemporaries. Because I was getting a vast swath of what was going on in the contemporary world when I was in my first and second year, and I think for the reasons you've stated, your work really appealed to me because of the queerness, because of that sense of difference and a real sense of melancholy, which very much appealed to me then and still does now.
I mean, I think the interesting and odd thing is that as much as you are who you are, and that work ultimately, I never really thought of myself as like a gay artist. I still don't. I mean, I happen to be gay and I happen to be an artist. And I think that there are things about me that have to do with a kind of sense of outsideness or otherness that we all feel on some level or another for different reasons, whether it could be sexuality, it could be ethnicity, whatever it is. Whatever you feel growing up, there is definitely always an otherness.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know. It's like, now I know that there's a lot of queerness in art. But it's still just has to be, painting or not painting on some level, you know?
Yeah.
And Jesse Firestone has a question as a follow-up to this. Jesse, would you like to ask?
Yeah, I would. Hi, everybody. So when I look at the work and especially the pairing together, I can't help but think about grief and what it means to also process through memory. And when we're having this conversation about queerness and AIDS, I also think about myself in terms of looking for like queer elders, or what does mentorship look like in the face of like a generation that was lost. And that's one of the most beautiful parts of this collaboration, and in my eyes, is how you two are working across generations. And I'd love to hear from one or both of you about what it means to either be working up with an artist who's older or working down with an artist who's younger within this context of the gap.
Wow.
Zachary, you better talk about that. I hate being the older artist.
Well, I want to start this off by just finishing to answer Wayne's question, which was about, where I see my work, I guess, having a gay sensibility or queer. I don't know if this will answer it, but the earlier work sort of started off as a response to not really seeing myself reflected in art history. And I was very interested in the art historical reference. And so I just started drawing myself, like just very, and it was on the suggestion of Alison Norland, actually, who said, why don't you turn that gaze on yourself and perhaps draw yourself in these, similar situations. And I had previously been drawing images of other men. And so I think that's where the genesis of my interest in myself as being a catalyst started, but it sort of moved to the landscape when I started thinking about self as land, and the idea of rewilding as an response to queerness, or as an embodiment of queerness. So that's sort of how I would answer that question. And Jesse, yeah, I mean, it's been an absolute privilege, first of all, to get to even just have conversations with Ross, let alone, be in a studio and work on collaborations and have our work show together and create a dialogue that can't not obviously be, about what you're asking. So yeah, I mean, it's been an honor, which is sort of obvious, but
thank you. That's very sweet.
It's been also, I think, very formative to some of the work that I'm doing right now and have been doing, and thinking about abstraction in a different way than I did prior to working on collaborations, and prior to, delving into the idea of, in a fairly specific way, of memory and loss, and yeah, like the sort of gulf. Because I came of age in the late 90s, so of course AIDS is not over, but it
You're still coming of age, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, me, yeah, in some ways. But I mean, yeah, it is a very unique conversation, and not, I think, one that has happened a lot. I'm struggling to think of exhibitions, that, I guess, Art AIDS America, there have been a number of exhibitions that are sort of very specifically about
reactions to events.
Yeah, but ours sort of, I think this exhibition obviously contains that, but it is also, it also sort of contains a couple of other things. And, like the idea of, Gabriel asked a question of me about the void, and the idea of the void, and where it sort of sits in my work, because it sort of exists in Ross's work and my work, and I think that's one of the things that certainly has become much more pronounced in my conversation and working with Ross, is thinking about the void and thinking about absence in relation to queerness, and also in relation to, I think, ideas about loss and sort of intergenerational differences and similarities, and just having the conversation. Ross?
I agree. No, I mean, I agree. You know, like I said, I think that, you know, it's funny because from my experience, you say you never saw yourself in art, but I didn't really think like that. I just thought I did see myself as a painter and a lot of painters. And the artists that were gay, who were older than me, I thought their double entendres were idiotic. Like, who cares about Jasper Johns' secret, you know, like message that he's gay? You know, he used to put these things in his painting, you know, whatever they are. But he was very, very, I would say, like tight-lipped about it, and I just never had an issue with it at all.
Right.
I was gay. I was an artist. Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
I think that's more my generation's coming, you know, acknowledgement of it.
Yeah.
That it shouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah. I also think there's a geographical difference. You know, growing up gay in Saskatchewan and
well, that's absolutely true. I grew up in New York. You know, I went to NYU. I mean, you know, that's where everybody comes when they're gay. So,
and
it's not like you're not going to find yourself somewhere in that crowd. People like you. That's all you find. I always say, if you don't like gay people, don't come to New York.
I love it.
Where do we go from here?
Well, I know we're at time, but we have a question from Elizabeth Condon in the audience. And she says, the show looks beautifully installed at Wave Hill, and I can't wait to see it. From this conversation, I'm fascinated with the shared curiosity of an indistinguishable surface. Can you say more about surface? Does it become a type of space?
Who's she talking to?
Both.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ross.
What does it become? What was the last sentence? It becomes a what space?
Does surface become a type of space?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it contains the space. I mean, for me, I always think that, you know, if anything is going to happen, like the imagery that I find and the things that I'm attracted to are out in the world, because I'm in the world and I take things from the world currently and historically. When it comes to actually translating those things imagistically and painterly, I always feel like there's a chemistry to it that I need to understand and don't understand well enough. But in that chemistry, sometimes there's a mutation, like making the surface. When you make the surface of a painting or anything, sometimes you make mistakes, sometimes you get unintended consequences. And that's why the surface is so important, because it's the carrier of space and light. And it lets it come forward and lets it move back depending on where it is, let's say, in the chemistry of it all, in the pigment, in the paint. So yeah, for me, surface, I mean, talking about being gay, I always say I'm a surface queen. I mean, when a painting has a beautiful, you know, somebody once said, and I really kind of agree, I think they were talking about, well, actually, Jasper Johns or Bryce Barnum, they said, the thing about them is that they have the painting in the bucket. And I love that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's why, like, if you prepare well and you know, the kind of sensuousness that a surface can bring and how it can reveal light or conceal light, or, you know, how it kind of can double things up or be just with dark and light, basically. That's what the image is. That's where the image emerges.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would just sort of agree. And to add to that, surface is so important because it's when you're the physical experience of being in front of an artwork is just so important. I mean, oftentimes we're and over the past year we've been sort of confined to looking at art on screens, which is fine. But just even my recent trip to New York, and it's the first time that I've seen any art in a year and a half, and being able to see the exhibitions at the Met, the Alice Neal show, but also being in your studio and seeing your surfaces. It's just so important in also aiding in people sort of slowing down too, and looking and just being in front of something and having that full experience of surface and texture and color. And it's one of the reasons why I work with pastel, but I never ever fix the surfaces because they crystallize. It changes the whole experience and the whole reason for doing it for me. So surface is absolutely space.
And you made a very good point, which is that people should definitely come to Wave Hill.
Absolutely.
See the surface.
Yeah.
You understand
the reality of the thing. That's what makes the reality of the thing important.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you can see a poster.
So people have been able to get the backstory by attending this talk.
Right.
But when you come to Wave Hill, you're going to have a much deeper understanding and appreciation for these works, knowing a little bit more about how they came about, but also just the generosity that you've all shared with us tonight has been really wonderful. And to be able to hear, to talk about the works that resonate, but the ideas of how they came together, and the travelogue to Saskatoon and the Hamptons. I mean, it's really great to be able to, as the Consul General said in the beginning, of bringing people from two countries together. This has really done it.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists, artists, Ross Bleckner and Zachari Logan, and to the curators for guiding the conversation, Jennifer McGregor, Wayne Baerwaldt, Leah Taylor. We're really, really grateful. This was a really fascinating discussion. And I want to thank my colleagues, Eileen Jeng Lynch, our curator of visual arts, and Jesse Bandler Firestone, not only for helping to set up this program, but also for all of the work that they did on the exhibition at Wave Hill. And I realized I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Gabriel de Guzman, who's the director of arts at Wave Hill. So I want to thank our audience for joining us. And we do have a number of programs coming up in conjunction, more programs coming up in conjunction with this exhibition. The next one is on June 29th. Oh, yay, there you go. They're all listed right there. The next one's on June 29th. It's a conversation on queer rewilding. That will be a conversation with Zachari Logan and Christian Murphy, who's an ecologist from the Bronx River Alliance. And the other programs are listed. They're also on our website. So please join us and sign up to attend the programs.
I also just I had forgotten to make this pitch earlier, but there is a really fabulous catalog that accompanies the show that has an essay by Wayne, Sandra Fraser, and myself, and it is available in the Wave Hill shop and Julie Saul Projects and Paul Petro Gallery and online through Wayne, right?
Right.
All the places. And I would really encourage you to, those of you who are fans of both artists, to add this to your bookshelf. And there's a special edition that has a collaborative print as part of it.
Maybe we could show that, Eileen. Sorry, that's not the best reproduction of it. That's my fault. But you get
Well,
enough. But
Well, you
anyway.
can see it at the show.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
One more reason to come.
Nice. If I must say so myself.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Oh, yeah.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Leave me.
Oh, there's a question here from Margaret Basai. Will this discussion be available? Oh, Gabriel's on it.
Yeah, I think it will be, right? And you can check our website. It'll be posted there. Is
Oh,
that
great.
right, Eileen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Wonderful. Great to see everyone.
Okay,
Okay.
bye-bye.